Welcome to Healthy University, where we'll discuss issues and subjects on how you can live a healthier and more productive life. And now, here's your host for Healthy University, Alan Eisenberg.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of Healthy You. This is your host, Alan Eisenberg. And as you know, we've now got Healthy You both as a podcast and a vodcast. So if you're listening to it, you can also watch it on YouTube. Or if you're watching it, you can also listen to it. And it's really something I'm proud of. And as I was just telling my guest today, this is what I studied in college. This is what I thought I was going to do for a long time. And then my career kind of took a turn. But what's great is now I'm turning it back the other way. So I'm bringing my passion about recovery and self-discovery and health and marrying it with now new technology that I am able to use to be able to create these shows. So it's really exciting for me. But what's even more exciting is that I have my guest and good friend Avdeep Bahra on today. Avdeep, you may, if you're a follower of the podcast, remember she's been on, what is this, Avdeep, our third?
At least the fourth
Yeah.
time.
And then we actually did one together on someone else's show. So it's kind of great. But Avdeep is an occupational therapist. She uses various mindfulness-based techniques to enable clients to overcome self-limiting beliefs and thoughts. She guides clients to work through feelings of overwhelm, stress, frustration, I'm frustrated saying that word, and isolation, and more. Avdeep has an undergraduate degree in psychology and a master's in occupational therapy. She's also someone I am happy to call friend. Welcome back to the show, Avdeep.
Thank you, Ellen. Thanks for having me again.
So I have to tell you, it's just great to connect on video for me because I see your soul. I see, the depth of who you are. And we've been, like I said, we've been lucky enough to kind of build a friendship. And for those of you watching or listening, today was a weird day where Facebook said, oh, you've been friends with Avdeep for a year. And it's like, that's, I just like the way the universe works now. And I've learned a lot about letting the universe do things that surprise you. And so what we're going to talk about today is how I think sort of the opposite of when we don't just allow things to happen and we end up in emotional suppression. So we're going to talk about emotional suppression. And I certainly can talk about this because I did it for many years due to the bullying and abuse that I dealt with as a child. I suppressed many of my emotions for probably near 30 years. And I believe Avdeep has her own stories to share as well as the research she's been doing on it. So why don't we start, Avdeep? Just, I think emotional suppression is a big word for people. What does it mean?
Well, it is a big word, and really, bottom line, emotional suppression is just the avoidance of emotions to the point where people don't even know they have the emotions anymore, right? It's numbing what you feel. And the thing I'm learning is that with emotional suppression, people often numb out the painful emotions, the sadness, the anger, the frustration, all the pain. But as they numb and suppress those emotions, it also numbs the joy. So it's not just one way, it's both ways.
Yeah, and it's really one of those things, I not that I'm advocating or not advocating medication, but when you're, have some states, a lot of the medication is to make you even. But being even is somewhat of a loss of both sides of the fence, right? Because as I've been saying a lot lately, life is about 50-50. Life is about what I call contentment, that middle ground. And anything else is gravy, right? Anything above contentment is happiness, and anything below is sadness. But life will be journeys along that line that will always lead back to the middle, contentment. That's my take on it. And that keeps me more grounded. But I didn't think that way for a long time. So, I spent a lot of years going, I'm not good enough. I was abused. Something's wrong with me. Self-esteem, of course, plays a huge issue, I think, in emotional suppression, as well as abuse and things that lead you to start to question, I think, why you should ever show any emotion, because it's harmful for you. in your mind, right, after an abusive situation or whatever you went through. How does it become the normal pattern that people go through? How does it do that?
I think it starts with exactly what you're saying. It's people's, I think part of it is society and culture and upbringing. We're told, always be happy, right?
Mm-hmm.
On your face, you put that beautiful mask on, and you never show anger or sadness or frustration, right? And you begin to believe that, okay, that's what's acceptable, right? And as a child or a teenager, or even as adults, we want to be loved and accepted, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we learn these beliefs that in order to be accepted, to be loved, then I need to be happy all the time, or I shouldn't show my emotions, or I need to be a people pleaser, or all these other beliefs that come along, right? Or I shouldn't have conflict. So, conflict means usually people have conflict because they're angry with someone or disappointed, but rather than feeling those emotions and acting on them and expressing those emotions, people want to be liked, accepted. So it becomes the norm, and it really leads to people being disconnected from their bodies too. More of what I'm seeing, right? More in their heads, and just those emotions are in our bodies, but because you learn to not feel them, you also learn to not feel your body.
Right, right. And I like that you use the word masks, because that's the way I thought of it for many years. Is I had all these masks. I had like a collection of them, and by the time years went by, and I would put on this mask around these people, and I knew what they were. I had done acting in high school, and I found that that was a great mask, right? So instead of having to show my emotions, my true, what we call our authentic self, who are we really? Who are we really? And especially at times where you're in your teens, you're in those questioning years of who you are. I think it's particularly bad habit to get into, where I just had all these masks, and I did it for exactly what you're saying, people pleasing, or no belief in myself, like I'm not good enough, so this mask is going to make me. People thought I was very egotistical for a very long time, and I had such low self-worth. But I was coming across this way because I was overcompensating with my mask, right? And it's like, no, I don't have any self-worth. I I'm totally not thinking this way you think I'm thinking. Um, and and I think the difficulty is really recognizing that, right? So how do we recognize when someone is suppressing these emotions, when they've been either damaged or have hit this wall, and that this is now the norm for them?
I think, well, for the, I guess there's two ways for the individual to recognize they're doing that and suppressing emotions. And the other thing is for the outsider. So, for
Hmm.
instance, me or you working with people who are doing that, I think some of the tell signs of me as a therapist seeing it in someone else is when you see the obvious signs is poor coping mechanisms,
Hmm.
like, you know, too much drinking, smoking, drug use, um, the obvious signs. And then there's also when people are constantly busy, busy in work, excessively working out, just doing all the time, because when they stop, then stuff starts to come up emotionally and thoughts and stuff. So busyness, people who tend to, avoid situations or people that trigger those emotions, that remind
Hmm.
them
Hmm.
maybe of past or past traumas.
Hmm.
So avoidance of people and places is another, can be a sign as well of avoiding your emotions.
Another interesting thing I've noticed is sometimes you have an addict in the family. So you might have an alcoholic father or an alcoholic mother. And so you compensate by enabling, right? So you don't want them to feel bad, and they're someone you love. So you end up not telling them and not being honest with yourself, but drinking with them, or participating in their vice that they are not dealing with. And I've seen that so much. It's just
Mhm.
one of the, when we think of suppression and suppressing who we are and our emotions, we don't think about those things, but so many of us do it. Like, I don't want to disappoint my mom. I don't want to disappoint my dad. And they have these issues. So I'm going to, participate in these issues I would never have done myself because of it. And
Mm-hmm.
familial issues are real. The longer I'm sort of in this game that I'm in with mental health, the more I see familial issues. So what have you run into that? And if so, like, what do how do you get people to get the courage to tell their loved ones that this is going on?
I think I definitely, the first word that comes to mind is codependency,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know, um, and it's an unhealthy dependency on someone in the family. And I really feel boundaries is a big thing, right? Because that's when boundaries are crossing and there's not either a strong enough boundary or a too weak of a boundary. So, for instance, the example you're giving,
Mm-hmm.
you see the family member drinking, so you go along with it, even though you
Mm-hmm.
don't want to, but you want to please them. I can think of myself and my family having someone who, wants things a certain way and I don't agree, but I go along with it because, again, I want to be liked and accepted. And
Right.
right, so I go along and it makes me feel in my, now that I'm more in tune with my body, there's so much discomfort in the body, but when you're emotionally suppressed, you don't even realize that your body's feeling uncomfortable, right? So
Yeah.
setting boundaries and saying, well, I don't feel comfortable doing this, and being able to articulate what you want. So assertive communication and really beginning to understand yourself and your own
Yeah.
needs um, takes you a long way in terms of breaking that cycle of doing those types of things that you don't want to do, but you do for the sake of people pleasing or whatever
Yeah.
other reason.
Well, and it's a journey of discovery, and it's sometimes a painful discovery, right? Like,
Mhm.
the truth is we put a lot of labels on ourselves, and I don't even want to say society labels us. I think we label us. For example, it's only recently that I've really come across the fact that I'm a highly sensitive person, and this is a real diagnosis. This is a real thing. And it's
Mm.
just, I thought, why am I so sensitive? Why is everyone else not feeling what I'm feeling? Well, 20% of us are highly sensitive, and you can usually tell who they are. I always play the game that everybody's got a little bit of high sensitivity, and the game I always play is, have you ever had the phone, you went to go call someone and you pick up the phone and you go to dial it and they're already there? And
Yeah.
everyone's got that story, right? And I
Yes.
say, statistically, what a statistician will tell you, the chance of that happening, given all the seconds in a minute, milliseconds that it takes for the phone to ring, all the minutes in a day, all the days in a week, and all the other people that you know that you might have called, you're talking about statistics that are greater than the biggest lottery that's out there of that happening. Yet it happens to almost everybody all the time. And that's
Yeah.
high sensitivity. You have a connection with somebody that is not verbal, not, they could be thousands of miles, well, thousands of miles away, and you've connected to them somehow. And this
Hmm.
happens, and people just don't think about it. It's like, oh wow, that's kind of weird. But then, when you're highly sensitive like me, it gets really frustrating because I'm feeling empathic feelings, and again, they're feelings. I don't read minds, but they're feelings, and different people will have different reactions, of course, but everybody thinks I'm very extroverted. So that was another thing I was labeled. In fact, I had a guy just, giving me Myers-Briggs all over the place yesterday. He's just so into Myers-Briggs. Oh, you're an ENFJ. And I always tell people, I said, no, no, I'm this thing called an extroverted introvert.
Right.
And
Right.
this is real. Like, so we're not just extroverted or introverted. I love doing this podcast. I love presenting to people. I love doing all these things. And afterward, I want to go and watch TV and not be talked to. And of course, my wife drives her crazy. But
Yeah.
but that's what I do. I spend enormous amounts of energy dealing with my emotion because I'm not suppressing it now, and then I'm exhausted. And that's real. That's another reality.
Hmm.
So again, before, when I wasn't doing that, I was getting sick, like physically.
Yeah.
So one of the things I wanted to hit on was some of that, like the effects of emotional suppression on the body, right? So we always think the mind. Well, of course the mind. Of course we all know that emotional suppression can lead to all sorts of destructive mental behavior, right? Depression, anxiety, worry, stress. You know, this is the stuff we can talk about all day. But what's going on in our body?
Well, I mean, I can tell you from the research and I can tell you from personal experience. I mean, when I was emotionally suppressing, and the thing is with emotional suppression, you don't know you're suppressing a lot of the time. And, you know, you're talking about highly sensitive people, and that's energy, right? And our emotions are also energy. And when we're suppressing them and not feeling them, they're still in our body as an energy, right? They're not being let out. So, I mean, even for me personally, I can say I had all kinds of symptoms, you know, 5 to 10 years ago, pain issues, fatigue issues, and went to all kinds of specialists and, you know, no diagnosis, nothing's wrong with you. And I'm like, no, I'm not the way I was 15 years ago. Something's not right. And I was in my 30s at the time, right? And, you know, as I've done a lot of my own healing journey, it's been just so amazing to see the more I've become aware of my emotions and the more I've allowed myself to release them and express them in whatever ways I find and whatever ways I've been helped along in, my symptoms have subsided.
Oh, of course, yeah. I mean, I can't be any healthier than I am today, honestly, because I don't, you know, you were in your 30s, I was in my 40s. I mean, I was sitting there in my 40s thinking I had stomach cancer every day. My stomach is my key stressor, right? So some people, they stress and they eat. Some people, they stress and they drink. Me, I lose weight, which isn't a bad thing, except it's stress. So it's not a very good thing. So I was, you know, experiencing like, it was really, you know, fight or flight problems ultimately. You know, it was really this suppression was making me anxious and making me upset. And that was coming out two ways, two bad ways. One was this physical fight or flight that I felt that, you know, you have a sympathetic nerve that goes down your body to your stomach. And the idea is, of course, in fight or flight, you don't want to be hungry. You need to run away from the big giant lion chasing you or tiger. And so that's what that was, right? So I, you know, constantly was in great pain in my stomach. And then fatigue, of course, is the given. You're not sleeping. You're not, you know, you're fighting. You're in battle. This is what I say. You're in battle with your own mind. So people think we're in control of our mind. No, our mind is trying to control us. And it's this learning to not let it do that, learning to work with it and tell it what you need to do what you need to do. So I think people don't understand that, you know, emotional suppression really is a physiological problem. You know, and it's like you said, you know, we're how many people are constantly going to the doctor or thinking they're having a heart attack? I mean, you know, my son now works as an EMT in an emergency room, and every day somebody comes in, you know, with some stress related, I'm having a heart attack game. You know, like, you're not having a heart attack, you're in panic because you're fighting yourself. And that's what I think it really is. You know, at some point my bully stopped bullying me and I started bullying myself. And then I was actually, you know, anger was another side effect of emotional suppression for me. It was like I was blaming, I was angry, you know, I was trying to do everything in my power to not say it's me. And so what are some of the other challenges? You know, I know those challenges, right? What are some of the other ones?
With emotional suppression?
Yeah.
I mean, I think the biggest one is the unawareness, lack of awareness, right? And then once you do become aware of emotions that you've suppressed for so long, I think for some people it can be really overwhelming, right? One, they've never felt these emotions, and, you know, they don't even make sense for what's going on in their life. You know, I've had people say to me, and I've experienced the same thing, life is wonderful, family is good, work is good, and all of a sudden you're feeling so much anger, right? And like, why am I feeling so much anger? It makes absolutely no sense, right? And then having to cope with those emotions, because once they start surfacing, or once you start to do the work and allow them to surface, then it's, you know, learning how to cope with them in a healthy way, right? Because otherwise you see the other end of the spectrum where there's violence, right? Or people end up in mental health institutions because they don't know what to do with it. So, that's another big challenge. And I think other challenges are communicating with others, because you've always learned that you're not meant to be angry, you're not meant to be sad, yet you need the support system to get through and heal through all those things.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to express to others, this is what I'm feeling, and to the right people,
Mm-hmm.
family
Mm-hmm.
or professionals or whatever it may be, and being okay with that, because it takes a big step to tell someone, I'm feeling grief, I'm feeling loss, I'm feeling shame, I'm feeling
Right.
guilt, whatever, right?
And I think that's really the hard part is, coming to the truth of you, right? Coming to the front and saying, okay, now I get it. So when we come back, I'd like to go more into, what follows, what follows when you have this realization and you finally have to come to terms with your emotions. Because I think what people don't understand is we think, oh, we learn this as kids. I don't remember the class that I took that taught me anything about how to deal with my emotions, you
No.
know. So I think that there's a whole lot still to learn. So when we come back, let's talk about that a little, if you don't mind.
Sure,
So
sounds good.
so stay with me. We'll be right back with more Healthy You.
You're listening to Healthy University with Alan Eisenberg.
Hi, and welcome back to Healthy You. I'm here with my guest Avdeep Bahra, and we're talking about emotional suppression. And we were just kind of getting to the point where we were talking about when you finally kind of wake up, whether that you went and got help, you had some realizations, and I kind of did both. I went and got help, and then even years later, it was like, oh, this HSP, this highly sensitive person, was causing all these issues for me because I didn't think that it was real. I didn't think, I thought I was sensitive and I had some problem being sensitive, right? Like it wasn't right for me to feel this way. But I wasn't looking at the good side of sensitivity. And there's some weird good sides, like animals. So all animals are highly sensitive. All animals are triggered by instinct and smell. I mean, if you look at an animal, they're always smelling or looking around. They're sensing things that we don't sense. And then I've had weird experiences with animals, like where they've just come up to me where they aren't coming up to anyone else, or, you know, obviously doing things that they sense something in me. And that's actually like, again, I always think, wow, that's just weird. Like, I'm just saying this stuff. And then I get a book and it's like, yeah, it's all right there. Highly sensitive people have these reactions with animals. My favorite recently was I go to a concert for a group I like, or any concert really, or any performance. And when it first starts, I get goosebumps and I start to cry. And I'm like, what is wrong with me? I really want to see Coldplay. I love Coldplay, and I'm crying. They come out, and I'm having this huge emotional reaction. And it's the energy. It's this huge energy that's in the room. And they just came out with an article. If you get goosebumps during music, this is what it means. And it's like, there's me, it's like, so you always think you're special, but there's a lot of us.
Yeah.
So again, how in that idea, right, of I feel different, how can a person bring more awareness to those emotions and stop, this suppression, like I shouldn't feel this way, or this isn't right, or whatever the things that I told myself, that I had to learn to embrace.
I mean, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head with one of those words. You said embrace, right? Starting with accepting those feelings that are coming is a starting point, right? And not judging them.
Right.
Because that's why we suppress them to begin with, or people suppress them, is because we judge those feelings as quote unquote bad, right?
Yeah. And usually someone has told us that along the way, right? Like, this
exactly.
is, and it's usually a trusted individual, a parent. We all make mistakes. Every parent will go back and go, I have regrets of what that I did with my kid. That's a normal thing, but it's the regret of self that I think that really we beat ourselves up on, right? So our parent says this to us, this is how you're supposed to behave, and that's something stuck in your head, and it's not necessarily the truth. I mean, obviously, there are people who are believe political things. Your family may have, or were racist or bigoted, and they, you don't want that to continue. Maybe, certainly, you may not feel that way. Especially in today's world, where when I went to school, I could count the amount of African American people on one hand. When my kids went to school, it was totally different, right? It was a whole other world with everybody in it. And so the baggage I might have brought to him on how to think about that, which we know happened, we know people did, is very difficult to then, unsuppress. I don't know how else to say it. So how do we unsuppress? I like that word, so I'm going to use it.
Unsuppress.
And move into acceptance.
Yeah. I think unsuppressing, I mean, for me, for instance, it had to start with help. I think I was completely oblivious, and I think many people are. So for me, it honestly started with things like acupuncture and biofeedback and other people giving me feedback. And then it sort of touched on my awareness. It was like, like a ripple when you throw a pebble into a lake and it hits the water and you have that initial ripple. And then you realize, oh, there's way more going on here, right? So someone touches that awareness for you, and then it just opens it up even more. And I think tapping into our own bodies also taps into unsuppressing. Because like I said, we hold a lot of stuff in our bodies. And, even people for anxiety, for instance, we feel chest tightness, or you feel heart racing, or sweaty palms. And even, I've told people, feel your body, and even ask your body, what are you telling me, right? Rather than rejecting that feeling, because you get the chest tightness, I've had it. You start freaking out, or many people start freaking out, and it turns into a panic attack. There have been times I meditate and my chest tightness gets worse and worse and worse, but I'm so accustomed to it, I know it's just my body speaking to me. I mean, it can be a heart attack, so I don't advocate for everyone to do that, but and I ask my body, what are you saying to me? And the more in tune you are with your own body, the more I'll actually get answers. I'm like, oh, that's anger, or that's shame, or I'll have an image of what happened to me as a child and the emotions connected to that experience, right? And then the next step is like, oh my God, what do I do with this, right? And I think the word unsuppressing is a great word, because once you unsuppress, it just opens up, like, it can be a volcano, or it can be, like the slowly erupting volcanoes where the lava is gradually coming out slowly. And I see this images of Hawaii where, the volcanoes are slowly erupting, the lava is gently kind of, going down to the ocean. But
then the nice finish to your thing is that once it hits the ocean, then something hardens it, right? And then it becomes concrete, right? Then it becomes this real substance. And that's really what's there under that layer of lava, is this, substance. And I think that idea, the other thing you said that I practice and read about is like, as I said, you're in a battle a lot of the times with your mind and body, and we don't think of it like that because it's very difficult to believe that, we believe as thinking humans that we control our mind or our eyes are telling us reality, when we know that there's proof that there's not. There's concrete proof, that a schizophrenic, what they see out of their eyes is what they really see, whatever their mind's image is. And so I learned something you talked about, which is to question, to go third person, right? Pretend like you're watching a movie of you when you're having an attack of some sort, or when you're in some sort of a distress situation. Pretend like it's a movie and see if you can go, what's going on here? Let me try to analyze this, because that analytical side of our brain is not functioning at that moment. So if we can put it into analysis, if we can kind of question our own mind and body, why am I reacting like this? It's like you said, you're meditating. Where's the danger? And I've made a point lately of saying, we were built for danger. We were built for being out in nature and coming across dangerous things. I've been around a rattlesnake. I know what a real panic is, when you see a rattlesnake at your feet. And now we don't. Now we sit in offices all day and we don't have these threats that we used to have in life. And so now our minds are making them. And this is what we know, right? I'm not making this up. This is studied. We're actually making and perceiving threats that are not real. And a lot of that can come from suppressed emotion, right? So we were suppressing this emotion, and then something happens that has it start to come out, and we head into fight or flight.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, because it's exactly what you're saying, perception, right? We perceive through all our five senses. And all the things that we perceive, they initially, the first place they'll go is like our reptilian brain, like our brainstem, the back of our brain, right? And that's where our fight, flight, freeze is, the survival, like you just said. So when we perceive, we're actually perceiving a lot more information than we're consciously aware of. So a lot of the unconscious stuff, it hits the back and of our brain, the hindbrain. And if we're not, this is where things like awareness, consciousness, mindfulness helps, because you activate the frontal lobe as well, which is the more logical thinking brain, which tells you, okay, there is no threat right now. There is no bear coming into my campsite. There's, because you may have heard someone say a word or a sentence, and all of a sudden it sends you into a spiral of like physical body reaction. Because the old reptilian brain, it's reminding you of something in the past. But once you're able to engage that frontal lobe, the front of your brain, which is more conscious, more logical, and they communicate, the front of the brain and the back of the brain, they communicate together, then you're able to say, okay, this is just words they said. What's the real meaning behind these words? And they're not a trigger then, right, for some of those emotional reactions, which is where some of the deeper parts of our brains are acting on, right?
Right. And I think that for me, at least, and then I think for a lot of people, that suppression, that idea that when we're not being honest with our own emotions, we're putting a huge struggle on ourselves, and then we've never learned to cope with it. Like, if I've never allowed this to happen, I've never learned a coping mechanism to deal with it. And that's led to me huge frustrations, huge feelings of what's wrong with me. I mean, I think that's the famous statement that comes out of emotional suppression. Is what's wrong with me for feeling this way? And so I'm not going to. And then you actually, suppression can be very deep. Like, you actually believe it's not around, but your body's going to tell you differently, right? We know that. But that's the danger part to me, is when I was suppressing, and when other people suppress, and maybe when you dealt with suppression, what it does is it puts this agonizing part of you in play, which is I don't even like me. A very dangerous thought that we see. I don't even like this person because this isn't who I want to be. This isn't who I should be. And so we fight this thing that is who we are. And you have to find that honesty. It's amazing to me that we fight that. So tell me, what's some of the research going on these days in the world of emotional suppression and what we're finding out?
Well, I mean, we've talked a little bit about how, the emotional suppression, it affects things like the HPA axis, or, the hypothalamus in the brain, the pituitary in the brain, which are all what sense our environment and our stressors and our threats. So, even emotions are affecting the hypothalamus, the pituitary in the brain, which in turn, they send messages to the adrenals, which are where our fight or flight response comes from. Cortisol, when there is a stressor, the adrenals act and they have us fight, flight, or freeze. And emotions are the same. And they're finding that, emotional suppression, like shame, is something people don't often feel, they're not aware of, right? Or feelings of loss or guilt. So when we suppress those emotions, there's more and more research coming out that those, for instance, they found that feelings of shame that are not felt will still have the same effect on the HPA axis as an actual threat, like being attacked by someone in a dark parking lot. That's a real threat. That's a stressor, and that affects the HPA axis, and it causes you to run, get away from the person that's attacking you. They're finding, shame, for instance, kicks in that same HPA axis, and it can result in an increase in cortisol. Feelings of loss actually kick in the same HPA axis, and it can reduce your cortisol. So they're finding different ways that these different emotions are affecting our physical body, and then when you're not feeling them, they're constantly acting on your body, and you don't know, right?
Yeah. So personally, I know you've talked about it yourself. Are you willing to sort of share a little bit about how you've overcome it? Like, what did you do when you were dealing with these feelings and you realize, okay, I've got an issue here? I think it's helpful, like, to talk about what we did. What did we do?
For sure. I've done many, many, many things, but I think for me, one of the well, there's so many, really. I think when I've had feelings, I've actually allowed myself to feel them. And there was a time when I would constantly be crying. I said, "Oh my God, I can't cry. This is not right," like you said, right? We're not allowed to cry. This is a bad thing. And then you feel bad yourself, and it's a vicious cycle. And I told one of my healers, one of my teachers, mentors, I said, I can't stop crying. It actually started because I did a food detox, and I stopped coffee. And all of a sudden I was crying every day. And I realized coffee was actually something that helped me cope, because I would drink coffee in university all the time. I had a very lonely university time, no friends, like just hours of loneliness, and I would drink coffee, and it reminded me of that. And I told my mentor, and he said, "Well, what's wrong with crying?" He said, "Crying is just like any other emotion. It's just a form of expression, just like people smile and laugh." And that really hit something for me. And I said, "Oh, you're right. There's nothing wrong with crying." And since then, I would just allow myself to cry. And honestly, I would feel a difference in my body, So that was powerful. Things like, because even with people who've experienced trauma, they have a very hard time expressing in words what they're feeling. So I think things like art therapy has been very powerful for me. There's times when I would, I've seen therapists and counselors, and I would go and I said, "I'm not really feeling anything." And they'd say, "Well, let's do some art and painting today." And good Lord, tears and tears and tears. I'm like, where is this coming from? Because it's in there. We're just not aware. Exercise is another modality. I've been running more this year, and that's another thing. I'm running and my tears are flowing.
Yeah.
It's just the body wants to release it. I meditate, the same thing. It's like I'll tap into some emotion, or sometimes I don't even know. I just feel tears rolling down my
Yeah.
face, and I don't even know what it's about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't even know. So mindfulness has helped me. Tai Chi has helped.
Hmm.
Things like craniosacral therapy, where we
Yeah.
hold ourselves, energy work. There's so much out there.
Well, and people don't realize like what you're really saying is these things are allowing you this release.
Hmm.
It's really like me, as a HSP, I can't bottle. Like I've always been an emotional talker, and here I am, a man. So like I went to a peace retreat a couple weeks ago. My yoga teacher, another way of my coping, puts on these retreats, and so I said, okay, I said to my wife, I said, you want to go? She's not really into it like I am, but she's like, yeah, I'll go with you. That's fine. And it was 30 women and two guys. And I
Wow.
thought to myself, I said, well, I'm one of the two guys, right? I'm the guy that feels, and the other
Mm,
guy's an 80-year-old guy that feels. And everyone else is suppress. All these other males are suppressing because there's no reason it shouldn't be 50-50,
mm,
but it's not going to be because we're under this other pressure to not cry, to not show and express emotion that way. And I'm telling you, we know this, that men deal more with using alcohol and drugs as coping mechanisms. And interestingly enough, so I'm Jewish, and I'm an Ashkenazi Jew, which means I came from Europe. So lots of fun with slavery and mass killing and all these other things that go into your genetic history. But what's interesting is I have a friend in the DNA world, and there's two interesting parts. One, Ashkenazi Jews have the closest DNA, which means we definitely came from the same cousins, whatever family. So that's interesting. But even more so, the statistic is that at any given time, 20% of women are depressed or dealing with depression, and
mm,
10% of men.
mm.
And I say that statistic is off. It's 20% of men and 10% of men are coping with alcohol or drugs or some other form of, of denial of suppression.
Right.
And I tell you, the weekend I had was both amazing because, women are just so much more honest, and I'm willing to be that way. So it was very, for me, kind of that same thing. Like I'm allowed to be here and feel,
Mm,
and everybody's there, as I said, sort of for their own reason, for their own personal need to express this moment of release and just be,
mm,
be who they are. And I came away, again, tears probably, refreshing tears, if that even makes sense.
mhm.
But it's kind of like I think what you're talking about. We can feel refreshed after allowing our emotions to come out. And they don't have to last forever. We're talking about letting them out, and we're done with it,
Yep.
right? And that's it. That's the show. So that's what we're doing. And it's so important. So anyway, um, I do like to ask my one last question here, sort of my favorite question to you. And even though it's the third time on, you probably always have a different answer. What is the one way that you're living healthier today? So with emotional suppression in mind, let's go down that path. What are you doing to cope and live healthier today every day?
Well, I can definitely say the one thing I am doing, I am allowing myself to feel. And that means the whole spectrum of feelings, right? And I feel more alive and more connected to myself, and I feel more connected to others by allowing myself to do this. So I'm grateful for feelings.
Yeah, and I love it because I get to go on the journey with you, and you get to go on the journey with me because we have this amazing thing in our world, Facebook, and if you use it correctly, I'm not saying you use it. I'm always cautious about all the people who sit there and complain on it all day because or use it as a political maneuver because I think the people who get the most out of it are sharing these very positive things in their life. Particularly if they have a story with them. And that's sort of my favorite thing now with a lot of websites that I found and write for, which is here's the issue I had, here's the journey I went through, and here were the results I had. And you can read mine, or you can read tons of other stories. And again, it's both sometimes familiar, but also new, and you learn. And I think that was sort of the key point that I wanted to kind of end on, is we have to learn. It isn't going to be automatic. It isn't going to be tomorrow. You're not going to go, okay, I'm going to be honest with my emotions tomorrow. It's going to be a journey.
It is.
And to allow that to happen, right? To allow that journey, because it's not going to be comfortable the minute you start it.
No.
And it may not be comfortable for a while, but learn to find comfort in yourself. And I always like to say, take yourself out on a date. Who are you showing up as? That sounds great. People go, whoa, what's that? So seriously, go out, have a meal with yourself. Are you comfortable? Are you feeling like squirrely? Why are you feeling squirrely? So like now I do all this stuff where I go, and I talk to the waiters and wait staff. And of course, again, I drive my wife totally bonkers now, but it's like, that's me wanting to connect. That's me wanting to have, they're human and I'm human. And I think that's fun. So again, I love having you on here. This isn't the last. Hopefully you're not going to go, oh God, I had to be on video this time, so I don't know if I'll do it with Alan again. But,
no, I'll be happy to join again.
But I love, you're always bringing something new. And every time you do it on Facebook, just know I'm going to be hitting you up and going, let's do another show.
Okay, for sure.
Because that's the fun of it, is I'm in discovery every day. And I think that's the other thing. Don't ever say, well, I'm too old. Well, it's too late. I can't change. I can't do this. I can't. I'm changing every day.
Mm-hmm.
And it's discovery, and it's wonderful, because it's you learn. And this is why I've been doing this. This is what, and it doesn't mean you're going to change it overnight. It just means you have awareness, and awareness is half the battle. That's what I say. So tell me how people can get in touch with you. I know you practice as a therapist, and you also share and write. How can people learn more about you?
They are welcome to visit my website. It's just my name, avdeepbahra.com.
Great.
And I'm on Facebook too, obviously. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, obviously. Yeah, and fun to follow, because you're taking a journey on Facebook, and I am too, and a lot of us who are doing this are, and it's fascinating, again, to see the connection, and then also see where someone says something like emotional suppression, you go, I haven't talked about that. And that's what got me. I'm like, all this other stuff I talk about, and I haven't talked about something that I did for 30 years.
Huge.
So thank you. Thank you for being on again. And I look forward to doing it again, and continuing to follow your path in life. I think it's a great journey. So have a great evening, or could be day for someone else. And I hope you'll join us again, to the audience, for more Healthy You. For now, this is Alan Eisenberg with Avdeep Bahra. Have a great day. And that's the show. Okay.
Thank you for listening to Healthy University, brought to you by Bullying Recovery, LLC. This podcast does not replace the need for medical advice, professional diagnosis, opinion, treatment, or services to you or any other individual. The information provided here, or through linkages to other sites, is not a substitute for medical or professional care, and you should not use the information in place of a visit, call, consultation, or the advice of your physician or other healthcare provider. Join us next time for more Healthy University.